Hi, good morning everybody. I'm working on a new project and I'll show you a close-up of this. I don't know if you can see it all that well. I've been working on some really big quilts, and you know me, I like to change it up, do something a bit smaller. So what I've done is, I'm not going to pick it up because I'm working on it right now, but you probably can see it. This is a panel that I bought. I think it was about $12 or $13. Not that much at all. And the reason I'm telling you that is I know you're just beginners or not. If you really wanted to try to practice free motion quilting, I've talked about it a lot. Oh, it's not a beginner's. But panels, and I've said this before, panels are the easiest, best way, a most effective way, and really the easiest way to experiment, and the cheapest, really. You can get a pretty panel like this. This is more of an expensive one because this was digitally printed, as opposed to the traditional printing method. There's a company called Hoffman, and my watercolor panel is by Hoffman, that I thought was so pretty. So I got this from equilter.com, and this is called Dream Big. It's so pretty. It's brand new. A Hoffman Spectrum print by Jeannie Sumrall Alero, Hoffman, California International Fabrics, www.hoffmanfabrics.com. It's this incredibly beautiful pastel burst of flower. And I loved it so much that I actually bought another one in another colorway. Let me see if I can find it. It's over there. I'll find it later. In just the shades of like an aqua. So pretty, just plain. But this is the peach, pink, blue, and lavender. Colors of the pastel rainbow. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quilt this. I'm not putting a border on it like my other one. I just think it's beautiful art in itself, and I'll put a hanging sleeve on the end of it. But how I'm going to quilt it, I'm going to put the camera in here so you can see exactly what I'm doing, and I'll try to explain it. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to be quilting this with my free motion quilting and as you know, I use my stencils and my quilt pounce. If you've never seen this before, this is called quilt pounce. You fill up this little reservoir with chalk here, and with all sorts of different stencils, you can create real pleasing designs. Now, what I have done is I have dozens and dozens of stencils, but I've actually pulled a couple of them that have, if you can see here, I've already started more of a feather stitch, a feather pattern, I should say, because some, let me just show you, some, let me just see if I can find here, some stencils, they have a more angular, like this one here. Oh, pardon me. This one here, I have dozens and dozens of stencils. Oh, like say this one here. This one here, if we can see, has more of an angular, almost like a grid type of, tailored, as it were. That would be a lovely border. There's a real pretty butterfly. Look at that one. Isn't that pretty? I don't know if you can see that. Or something like this has a bit more, like a bit of cable, a bit more tailored, as I said. So I won't be using this because what I want to do is I want to actually showcase almost every single, if you can see, every single solitary leaf that there is with a different pattern, quilting pattern, but coordinating feather pattern. So I'm really, you know, there's no real rhyme or reason to my marking this. Now, what I've done, if you might say, well, have you sandwiched your quilt? I haven't. I haven't picked a batting yet. I mean, a backing yet. I'm going to go shopping again and I'll pick something. But I was experimenting with my chalk pounce because I had a disaster with my jelly roll quilt trying to have this chalk show up. So I did an experiment, and I hope you can see how beautifully and how easily this is marking, and it will not go away until I'm very careful stitching it all out. I'm pretty assured, because that's on there pretty good. Even though this is a pastel, I'm really assured that this will probably stay on there. So now I'm sort of trying just to keep using varied of my stencils, but still keeping in the feather look. So when you look at this quilt, your eye's just going to be all over the place looking at beautiful patterns. So what I do is I'm going to just find this pink leaf here, and on a piece of this or on a section of this one quilt stencil, I'll just scrub and pounce and rub my powder into those markings and come up with a pretty design, a pretty feather design. It doesn't necessarily, I didn't use the same one, but your eye is going to be looking at all of this interest, but from a distance, obviously it's just going to read as one flower. So I'm going to continue using my powder, using my stencils. I'm going to do a little bit larger ones, perhaps in these large. Oh, that's a pretty one. That's just a flower. Look at that. It's just like a semicircle wreath flower. What I am going to do is I'm going to outline with my free motion quilting. I'm going to outline each petal. I'm going to outline maybe even twice, so each petal stays up. This quilt's going to be quilted very densely. It's going to be quilted within whatever, half an inch or so. But it's okay because it's a small quilt, and once I start free motion quilting, I can just whiz along, just hopping from and again, your eye's not going to see. Your eye's not going to see. You know, oh, that feather doesn't match that one. It's just going to be a real patterned but subtle, because you're going to see this beautiful pale pastel rainbow shade flower from a distance, but up close it's going to be real interesting. Now I was just going to say something. Oh, the middle here, hopefully we can see, I did do a specific pattern right in the middle of one particular stencil. But each of these I'm going to address differently. I'm going to address all of these differently. Now, when I get over to my machine, when I'm satisfied with all of the different quilting patterns that need to be stitched out, my markings, I'll very carefully on this table lay out the backing, batting, and this top, and just very carefully pin just, you know, between the stitches, and very carefully then start in the middle, being very, very careful. I'm pretty sure this isn't going to rub off until I stitch it out, and then I'll just start stitching. And what I plan to do, hopefully it will look okay, I have some beautiful connecting threads, cotton thread. I was going to do it in like a white, but I thought, no, I'm going to actually do this in a pale peach, and a pale peach, and then going up a very pale pink, a darker pink, a lavender, and then a bluey lavender. So each color will really pop. So yeah, so that's what I'm working on. Like I said, here is a real pretty, here's a real pretty wreath that, if you notice, you know, this petal here, this pink petal here goes into that one. Well, I'll just sort of ignore that bit right there. I can see the pattern, the leaf through, and I'll just pounce my white chalk, stopping it there, into the lines of my stencil. Oh, I actually have my cutting mat. Let me just get this out. because it's not a flat surface. You have to have a real flat surface to do this. So I'll just pounce and pounce and pounce. So my feathers are all random in each petal, but as a whole, hopefully, hopefully if I don't get fed up with it, hopefully it will look good. And then I think what will really make it pop is if I outline each petal with just a stitch, you know, a straight stitch, as it were, to outline each petal, to make each petal stand out with their own little design inside. Now let me see. Now you see that? See how pretty? So again, from a distance, this is going to read just a big, big, beautiful pastel flower, but up close, hopefully, it will be super. So I'm just going to continue marking it with all my stencils, and then I'll show you my progress. I'm holding my camera here, just showing you, I've stepped away from my machine, showing you my progress so far on my quilting my little quilt here. As you can see, I've put safety pins, but very, very just a few. I don't need it. I didn't need tons to hold this together because it's a small quilt, and I was very careful not to try to, you know, ruin my markings here. I must say, even though I'm working with it, some of the markings have not disappeared, but faded as my hands go through it. But I'm very, very careful, and I can actually just sort of fudge it. I know my quilting stencils. I know that there's feathers, and so I go this way, or I go that way, or I go this way or that way. And this is what I was talking about, going around it a couple of times. Like, I'm going to go back and do that one because it's very closely quilted, and I want it really close. Usually I don't like to quilt things so dense, but with these little feathers and bubbles, I want to have some semblance of order, of symmetry, and that one is a little bit too wide. So I'll just continue. Yeah, I can see my markings faintly, and I've done the middle part in the orange and the peach, and I've done this in the pale pink. I'll finish that up. That has pale pink thread, and then I'll come back and I'll use like a hot pink on here, graduating out to the lavender and then to the blue. But yeah, isn't that pretty? It's like so textural and so pretty. But from a distance, you see a big pastel, one big pastel flower. So yeah, just keep continuing free motion quilting. All my unusual stitches, from a distance, they all look the same. But up close, you can tell that the patterns are a little bit different. And again, if I have to wing it as I go along, it's just pretty. So yeah, so this is progress on my quilt. I'm at my machine, and I'm quilting my quilt. You've seen some of the work I've done already, and this I put this is hot pink thread that I'm going around, and just around the outside of these leaves, just loosely, just to outline each leaf. So from a distance, you can see what you're actually, you know what you're actually looking at, the separate leaves. And then I just sort of sort of wing it. The quilting stitches, I mean the feather quilting, sort of went outside of the markings, outside of the leaf, as you can see when I was pouncing it. But there's a faint glimmer, and I'll just finish off the feathers, sort of where I think they are. There's enough marking here. I'm okay with it. And each, you can't really tell, but each of the leaves has a different pattern that I've stitched inside of it. Let me just see. Yeah, this goes here. You can't really tell because from a distance they all just look, you know, like leaves or pebbles or something. But if you come up close, I'll go over here. And I sort of wing it. There. Not perfect, but again, the panel itself is so pretty. Even if my free motion quilting stitches isn't the best. They still look nice. I've totally missed the lines, but you get the idea. And when I brush the lines away, the white chalk lines, you won't be able to tell. It's just a lovely. Let's fill that in there. Yeah, I like that. Now I'll come over here with my outline stitch. Let me just see. This here. Sort of outline that there. There's sort of a hot pink. Again, I'm just sort of winging it. I like my thread matching the colors. Some of it I just actually make up as I go along, like that bit. But, oh, let me just go back up here, because I'm trying to do it like every ½ inch or so. Maybe even every ½ of an inch. I'll just come down here and stop there. There. I've just taken this out of my machine just to show you what I've been saying all along as far as the actual quilting of a quilt. Maybe some of you have gone to a quilt show and you've seen a quilt quilted, it's called, within an inch of its life. And pretty much this one is. Actually, the quilt show quilts are even quilted denser. They're very stiff and they're very it's just solid. It's just solid. There's so much stitching. I don't like to quilt my quilts 99 9/10% of the way like that, because the more air, the more air you have in between your quilting stitches, the warmer and fluffier and softer the quilt will be. Having said that, this quilt is a wall hanging and it's going to lay lovely and flat. But I just wanted to show you, you can see what I've quilted. I've started from the middle and I've worked my way out. Now, as you can see, this is lovely and flat, and it's quilted the exact same density across the quilt as I'm radiating out. Look at what's happening, which will go away on the outsides where I have not yet quilted it. Now you see all that puckering, all of that, I should say, all of that easing. The fabric has to be eased back into the quilt. That's because it's not quilted as dense as this. And so even right there, as you can see that big lump right there? When I quilt that lovely pink flower, it will just shrink right up. That's what I'm getting at. Now, I just wanted to show you quite a few of these, my markings. This one hasn't. That one's pretty good. Have sort of worn off. So I'm just going to go back and just hit those few. I'm pretty okay with how the markings have stayed on this quilt. And as you can see, obviously there's zero chalk on the quilt that you have to get rid of. But as you can see here, like all of that stuff right there will be taken up and be lovely and flat with the actual quilting. So even if you're quilting, however far away you're quilting, and I've said this before, the batting package will tell you, it can be quilted 6 inches apart, 6 to 8 inches, 10 inches apart, 4 inches apart. You really want to make sure that you follow the batting's instructions and quilt it. If you're quilting a quilt 4 inches apart, quilt the whole thing 4 inches apart. Even if it's a decorative stitch, if you're quilting it ½ an inch apart, then quilt the whole thing ½ an inch apart. And as you say, this quilt would be ruined if I just decided, well, I don't want to quilt it anymore. I just want to, highlight that flower. I can't do that. I have to quilt this right out to the edge. And then it will lay lovely, dense, and flat. So there is my quilting stitches as it's coming along. Just what I will do is I'm just going to go back with my stencils and just fill in, just pat these a little bit, like I said, to stitch them out. Considering that it's a pale fabric, I think I did pretty good following along the quilting marking with my chalk. Just have to go back and freshen it up a little bit in places. I'm coming to the end of quilting my panel, but I just wanted to show you, I have just around the edges to do and a few of the petals. I just wanted to show you how I keep reiterating how important it is that a quilt is consistently quilted across the entire quilt. As you can see here, these petals, it radiating outwards, have been quilted pretty much within every 1/4 of an inch to ½ an inch. And you may not be able to see, that's really laying flat. Now I will iron this when I finish it. This is going to be a wall hanging, but I just wanted to show you the incredible difference as I go along quilting it. See that lump there? I showed you this before in the last bit, but I just want to show you how very, very important it is that you quilt consistently. Now that lump right there, I have yet to quilt it, obviously, and it's going to just lay, as I do, it's just going to shrink right up, and it's just going to lay lovely and flat. And I've gone into the corner. Going into the corner there, and I'm going to be doing all the way around. I have to do this bit here, obviously, and this little bit here to make it completely flat. Now this is what I was saying. Some of my markings had worn off, but I was fine with that because I just went back, and like this one, I've just done sort of a corner stencil. So I will be going back and I will be stitching this out here again all the way to the edge, and then I'll continue, then I'll get another stencil and finish these up here and again at the corner, but yeah, and then it'll really lay lovely and flat. Then I'll go back and I'll see where perhaps there's a little bit of a large space. Now I don't know if you can see, but I'm not real cool with that right there. So I'll just go back and I'll just do a little. That was a very that's about every inch, and it's a little bit too puffy. I want it to be flat. I want it to be lovely and flat, my design. So I'll just go back and I'll just sort of fill in those feathers there. And this will be an incredibly flat wall hanging. Having pretty much filled, oh, but so I have to do that bit there, that bit of blue, and just maybe fill in along the edges, because I really just want it to be quilted, literally the whole thing quilted with all of these decorative stitches. So I'm almost done. I'm just going to go back. Oh, here's some of my stencils again. I just pulled different feather ones. This is a corner stencil here that I'll stick right there on the corner. Yeah. So and this is my quilt pounce there that I'm using. Again, this is an inexpensive panel. Oh, I didn't show you. Probably see. There's my backing. It's just a real pretty floral. I've had that forever. Oh, look at that Daisy Kingdom. Look at that. I don't know if you can see that. Daisy Kingdom was around. I made little girl dresses. Wow, I made dresses for my daughter with Daisy Kingdom fabric like 20 years ago. So yeah, so this is my panel. Again, free motion quilting, practice, and you have a quilt. You know, I'm going to put a hanging frame on it of the same fabric I have. So yeah, but I wanted again to just show you how important it is to quilt consistently across the top of your quilt. Okay, off to quilt it and finish my panel. I finished completely quilting my panel here, and what I've done is, as I was saying to you, I was going to come over to my ironing board. I'm trying to keep this still, and iron it before I actually put on the binding, before I trim it. As you can see, the batting is already here, and I've quilted out to the edge, as I said, but there's just still slightly wavy, just slightly wavy, and I want it to lay ever so flat. So what I've done, a few minutes ago, I came over, and let me just get this here. Came over and I squirted my quilt. Now, if you've been following me, you know that I do not pre-wash my fabrics. But the beauty of cotton, if it gets wavy, if you haven't pre-washed, there's a bit of shrinkage that's going to take place. And in this case, hopefully this will be in focus. There goes my phone. I'm just going to sort of wet it, and I'm going to very carefully and very slowly iron it. Now this is where I suppose a steam iron would come in really handy. Just lightly iron that little bit of a wavy edge there. And with the water on the quilt, the fibers are actually shrinking. And if you can see, hopefully you can see, I'm holding my camera and I'm ironing at the same time. Hopefully you can see all those little easings, like easing right there where my iron point is. The fabric is just sort of easing flat. It's just easing flat. So my edge of my quilt now is really lovely and flat. And it's okay. The quilting stitches will puff up again, obviously, when it dries. I mean, this quilt, that's all you see are quilting stitches. So what I'm going to continue doing is I'm going to go around each edge of my quilt and then the body of my quilt and just iron it. Really lovely. I only have a small ironing board. I don't have enough room for a huge lovely ironing board. I would love to, but I don't have one. So I'm okay with this. I'll just keep going. But I just wanted to show you, hopefully you can see it, how that when it dries, that whole pucker there, that whole it wasn't a huge ripple, but just slightly along the edge there, it's just really been eased in and shrunk. The stitches have shrunk, which I want it to in this case, in order for my wall hanging. Now it might not be, well, it might be advantageous if your borders are a little bit wavy also. So I find either a really good steam iron or water, spray, let it sit, and then a nice hot, for me, a nice hot dry iron it just literally shrinks those fibers into that edging so I can put my binding on. And I know my panel is square, so I can just finish this off. I can just enforce it there, and then I can just put my binding on this edge here, and then my quilt would be done. So but I'll let that dry out. I'll just keep touching it up, ironing it, let it dry out, and then I'll put my hanging sleeve on the back, and then I can finish binding it, and there's my pretty panel quilt. So I'll see you when it's completely done now. Thanks. So I've finished my wall hanging. It's not hanging on my wall. It's just hanging up here in my sewing room. And look, can you see what I did, folks? I actually mitered the corners. I usually round the corners. I know. I like rounding the corners, but I thought it's a wall hanging, and I want it to lay lovely and flat. So there are the corners. I can do mitered corners and squared corners, I should say. I don't love doing them, but for this application I did it. I'll take some still photos of my quilting as you've seen my journey. It's just so pretty. Again, just a panel, just quilted, and that would be beautiful hanging on a pale pink wall or a white wall, a headboard, you know, above a bed. Just such a pretty panel. In fact, I've actually, Hoffman's actually makes this panel in, as I was saying, a pale pink and a pale peach and a brilliant rainbow color. They also make it in like a white on white. The flower's white on white, and it just comes, or white and grayish white and tan and cream. Just very, 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 very neutral. I actually have ordered it. I've just had so much fun making it, and then I'm gonna make it again, and then just do all sorts of on the edges, maybe just straight quilting stitches, and make the flower more come alive. I did decorative stitches, as you know, on the entire over the entire quilt, decorative feather stitches over the entire quilt. Again, I'll take some still photographs of it. Not perfect, because I ended up quilting it denser than some of my actual stencils were. But all in all, I'm really thrilled. This is quilted literally within an inch of its life. Yeah, so I'm really pleased, and I think it's so pretty. I bound it with a the actual, like a pretty pale teal and white polka dot on the binding, and you saw the back is like a purple and pink floral. So I'll take some still pictures of it. I just wanted to, can't really get the beauty of it on a, you know, on my busy fabric wall here shelf, but if you can imagine that on a beautiful white wall, or it's just so pretty, so pretty. I love it. Very, very inexpensive. That cost $15, $25 to make. Wow, unbelievable. That's just the batting. I had the fabric. Yeah, 45 inches of fabric. What, a yard and a half or something like that? Not even. Yeah, we had a yard and a half and a bit of batting. So yeah, I'm thrilled with my pretty wall hanging. That all I did was quilt. So I hope you've enjoyed seeing this come alive, and I think that's what it is. It's come alive with the quilting stitches. Okay, thanks folks. Bye.